Welcome to Arts and Healing with Sandra. I'm your host, Sandra Sabine. I've gathered some friends to have some inspiring conversations, and I hope you'll join us for one, two, three, or all of them. My goal in connecting with you is to offer some inspiration and possibly some tools that you may not have thought of for healing and self-empowerment, even self-discovery. Art is forever seen as possibly a career or something we did as children. But for my whole life, speaking as a 50-year-old mother of many and grandmother of more, I have used art as an expressive outlet for healing and self-empowerment in so many dynamic ways that I can speak from personal experience that this is the most accessible and undervalued tool that we can use to build resilience, to build community, and create connection with ourselves and others that are deeper and more authentic and truer to ourselves. So join me and my guests for some episodes. I'm pretty sure you'll find some inspiration and maybe even a few creative pathways for you to explore, express, and experience for yourself. Welcome, guests and creatives. Oh, I'm so excited about today's conversation. Eric Maisel is here to talk to us and just kind of meander around the topic of creativity and wherever the conversation takes us. He's written over 50 books over his career, and I have listened to some incredibly inspiring and in-depth conversations that he's had with a number of different people. And I'll tell you, I'm just excited to dive into this conversation, see where it leads, and being the lifelong learner that I am, I hope that I walk away with some new tools of my own. Eric, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you doing, Sandra?
Fantastic on this Syracuse snowy day. And
Well,
where are you talking from today?
on this beautiful California day.
So lucky. Where shall we begin this conversation? I would consider you a pillar in the field of creative coaching. I would love for you to talk about that and a couple of other topics that maybe we'll dive into later if I can bring those up later in the conversation. Can we start with the creative coaching?
Sure. I'll give you the long story. I started out as a math and science boy a long time ago. Went to a math and science high school, started college in physics, flunked out by the time I was 17. I had no interest in science, it turned out. I was interested in human beings, not science. And so, having flunked out at 17, 18 during the Vietnam War, it was not a brilliant time to have flunked out of college. So, I enlisted in the Army. When I got out of the Army, I got a degree in philosophy, which is one of those things you do when you have no idea what you're doing. So, that was my next step in life, was to do philosophy. Then, at about the age of 24, I started writing my first novel. I'd always loved fiction. Didn't know I was going to write fiction, but I knew I loved it. Started writing fiction, had a career as a ghostwriter during my 20s, actually lived by writing, which is unusual, but it didn't make enough money for our growing family. So at some point, I retooled and became a psychotherapist in my early 30s. Quickly became disillusioned about the mental disorder model. We can talk about that, but it's one of my pet peeves, and one of my areas of writing is in my disbelief of the current mental disorder paradigm. So I didn't want to stay as a psychotherapist. I was working exclusively with artists as a therapist. Already, I was interested in the issues of creative performing artists. So I made this segue to something I called creativity consulting, because coaching didn't exist yet, actually. This was a long time ago. So I started doing this creativity consulting. And then when coaching became a word, I changed my label from creativity consultant to creativity coach. And that's what I've been doing for the past long time now, 35 years maybe, working as a creativity coach and training creativity coaches and writing about the issues that actually affect creative people, whether it's creativity and depression, creativity and anxiety, creativity and addiction, creativity in this, creativity in that. We have complicated personalities, the work we do is hard, and the world in which we try to operate is hard. So most creative folks, if not 100% of them, are challenged in quite characteristic ways. And that's what I've been looking at and working on for a long time now.
Mm. I think one of the most mind blowing thing I heard in listening to some of the conversations is the connection, and I'll allow you to speak to it, between anxiety and creativity. I absolutely love what I heard. Can you speak to that a little bit now?
Sure. Well, I've done whole books on it, so it's hard to say it in a few words, but there are certain reasons why anxiety must thread through the creative process. And since it must, we have to embrace the fact that it's going to be there rather than trying to fight it off. We can manage it, but we can't fight off anxiety. Why is it going to be there? Well, first of all, the creative process is making one choice after another. That's what the process is. Put the red here, put the blue there. Send your character here, send your character there. And choosing provokes anxiety. The very act of choosing provokes anxiety. You'll know this if you go shopping and try to make a decision between the good tasting cereal or the good for you cereal and end up bringing home no cereal because it was just a little hard to decide. Well, that's just cereal. But for a creative person, it's one choice after another forever. And so there's anxiety associated with that. Second, the creative process is a genuine going into the unknown. It's not some metaphoric going into the unknown. We really don't know what's there till we go there and start creating. And going into the unknown makes us feel anxious. That's one of those things that makes us feel anxious. Because of our nature as a creative person, we're ambitious. So what do? We master something, then we want to do something bigger, something that we've never tried before, something that maybe is just out of our reach. And that makes us anxious. So we could name 20 or 30 different reasons why anxiety threads through the creative process. The headlines are it's there. We have to embrace it. We have to accept that reality. You can't get rid of anxiety because it's part of our early warning system against danger. If we didn't have anxiety, we'd get into elevators with the wrong people and we would not be watchful enough. We wouldn't be vigilant enough. So we need the anxiety and then we need to manage it. That's the end of that sentence, is that at the end of all of that, we have to learn how to manage that anxiety because it's not super huge anxiety. It's just little tendrils of anxiety, but it's enough to make us not go into the studio on that day or not write on that day. The number one thing we do to deal with anxiety is flee the encounter. That's what we do. We get out of there. So if we're feeling a little bit anxious about our novel, we don't go to our novel. We go do almost anything else. And that's what most would-be creative people do. They're spending their whole lives doing something else because they don't quite realize that they're fleeing their creative work because of just a little bit of anxiety.
Hmm. I love that. I could sink into 100 different conversations with you around that. It's so the challenge in what I do, because I run a painting and drawing studio. That's the premise of the business I've run for almost 20 years. And I know there's more going on. It's a community, it's a support system, it's a connection that's, there's some students that have been coming for 10, 15 years, and that's that connection that they're craving. But I hear so many times the excuses they make to put in front of, like they never, or it took them 10 years to get to the door, inside the door to sign up to that level of commitment to their creative process, or just, jumping over the hurdle to get in the door. Um, but then once they're in the art studio, there's this almost great divide that I see that I love to talk to you about, just kind of organically. Those that come in to paint the pretty pictures, and that's oversimplifying for sure. And
Sure.
then some come in and they're looking for more and they can't quite put their finger on, well, I don't, because they paint in all different mediums and they choose exactly. It's like a studio class. So that choice making is sometimes anxiety inducing. And my job as a facilitator of this space is to create safe space and to help them navigate their inner language, kind of watching body language and what they choose to do and not do, to help just get that pencil moving. And to hear you talk about how making meaningful creativity and creative process, and I'll let you speak to that better because I know I'm going to misspeak or misquote you. That link between meaningful and creativity on purpose, finding purpose in what we're creating, and linking that to the anxiety, like having to have that as a part. It's a natural part of that process. To hear someone say that when I've been experiencing that and also facilitating a space around that experience for others for so many years, I don't know. I would kind of love to hear what you have to say about what I'm saying to you.
Well, I'll probably have to go all the way into deep philosophy to get at what we're talking about here. So I've been encouraging a couple of paradigm shifts over the last decades. One is the paradigm shift from the idea of the purpose to life, or the life's purpose, to the idea of life purpose choosing, that there are multiple life purposes. Each person has multiple life purposes. There is no purpose to life, and going out and looking for it at the top of some mountain or at some guru's feet or in some book is a mistake. Lots of people make that mistake and feel unsettled and unsatisfied because they think that life purpose is something to find. It's not anything to find, it's a choice to make. So we make our life purpose choices. For us, creativity is going to be one of them, but only one. So I don't want to put creativity on a pedestal because I think that we have multiple life purposes. Maybe family, maybe activism, maybe service, maybe career, maybe this, maybe that. We have lots of life purposes, creativity being one of them. So that's that we have multiple life purposes, which is actually big news because people get stuck on this, can't find my purpose. What is my purpose?
Yeah.
And all they have to do is stay put and make some choices about what's important to them. That's A. The second paradigm shift is the shift from seeking meaning. Same idea. We've had 2,000 years of this metaphor that meaning is something to be sought, that is outside of us. We need to switch that to the idea that we make our own meaning, that meaning is a certain kind of psychological experience, a subjective psychological experience. What's meaningful to me may not be meaningful to you. There's nothing that is objectively meaningful. The same thing may not feel meaningful on different days. One day, playing with our kids in the park may feel meaningful, and another day we want to get to our creative work and it's not feeling meaningful to be there. It's just feeling a drudgery to be there, etc. So when people understand that they have to make their own meaning, that it's only a certain kind of psychological experience, they begin to understand certain important lessons. One is that our life purposes are more important than the experience of meaning. We want to live our life purposes. If we get the experience of meaning from that, that's a blessing. That's an added bonus. But first of all, we need to live our life purposes so that we're making ourselves proud by our efforts. Those two different people you were talking about in class, one set of people, one group is not really operating in the life purpose place or in the meaning place. They're doing something else. They're doing something, let's call it decorative, to use one kind of word.
Yeah.
But they're not struggling with meaning and life purpose, at least not in that studio environment. They may be struggling somewhere else, but not there. But the other person that you mentioned or described is the person who probably from birth has been struggling with life purpose and meaning issues, probably has cycled through, a little Catholicism, a little Buddhism, a little existentialism, a little this, a little that, has been everywhere looking for something and now wants it to come from the painting. And probably doesn't have the skills to have the painting look like something that is experienced as meaningful by them. So it can be disappointing and frustrating to be in that environment. Just as an aside, I'm sure you'll remember the following. So Van Gogh starts out as a preacher. That's his first job in life. He preaches so passionately that he's fired by his bosses because he's just too passionate a preacher. So then he thinks about suicide because now his life work has just been ruined for him. But then he remembers that he also likes painting. So he thinks, well, I won't kill myself, I'll paint. But then he does something that almost no human being would ever think to do. He has some paintings in mind, in his mind's eye, he sees something which he knows he can't produce yet because he doesn't have the skill to produce it. So rather than starting painting, he spends a whole year just making strokes so that he can capture a pine tree with 6 strokes or a poplar with 7. He gets himself ready to make meaning. Quite exceptional. Most people just want to go do the thing, and then when they don't make progress on the thing, they stop the thing. He had that deep understanding that he needed to get his skill set up before trying the thing so that the thing would be experienced as meaningful when he did it. Very interesting, I think. And just to put a little period at the end of this piece of the discussion, what folks don't know, in addition to the things I'm saying about these differences between seeking meaning and making meaning, is the following. Things that we do in the service of meaning may not feel meaningful. That's actually a big headline. Let me deconstruct that. We may get 3 or 4 seconds of pleasure out of having made a painting, but the act of making the painting may not be pleasurable because we're struggling to make that painting, because we're experiencing anxiety or doubt or worry or not sure if it's any good or something's good. So since we didn't experience it as meaningful, then we begin to wonder, why am I painting if I'm not experiencing it as meaningful? That's when we have to remind ourselves that tasks in the service of meaning may not feel meaningful. An even better example maybe is writing a novel. If that takes you 365 days, maybe 200 of those days, or more like 300 of those days, you're not feeling that process as meaningful. You're just slogging along. You're putting in a word and taking a word out. You're hating the paragraph you just wrote, etc. Most people stop because they think that it ought to feel more meaningful than it does. So that we have to have this conversation, we need this mature conversation with ourselves, which is, I'm working on this novel because it serves my life purpose, my life purposes and my meaning needs, not because it's feeling good today. I don't need it to feel good today. I'm doing it for other reasons, not to make myself feel good today. This is the opposite of smiley face creativity, where we do it because we're going to get a grin on our face from doing it. Nope. This is a different place where we're doing this work to satisfy our life purposes and our meaning needs, and therefore we may have one hard day after another, and still we persevere.
Mm, beautiful. There's so many seeds of wisdom in there. And it brought me to a lot of the struggle that I witness, and just sort of an inner dialogue that I repeat the same things over and over. When people, am I done with this? Or where do you think I should go with this? Things like that. And I always bring it back to, well, how do you feel? How was this for you? Do you feel like there's some more challenge in the, like, it always goes back to their process and
Yep.
not the end product, because it's more about empowerment through the process. Because once that, I want to say, it's almost like, when they finally get into this groove, and they almost, you can see that they get in, they set up, they get in the zone, and there's this, almost like a healing place they go to while they're there. Everyone else could probably disappear for a while, and then they're either attached to it or not. It doesn't matter, but they got that out of it. And then there are those that struggle, like they can't, imagine picking the next piece. They get really caught up in all the steps, and then they dread being done with it because then they're going to have to pick another piece. So it becomes this really hard to navigate, and they lean into the things that we're saying as facilitators of the space. How do you feel, and how much further do you want to take this? And that's helping them to just make some choices around the meaning of what they're actually doing in the moment, which I've always thought was way more important than the product that they got at the end. And some of them come around to that and say, yeah, I guess you're right. But it's a struggle for sure. And it's a great conversation when they talk about it, just that whole scenario amongst themselves as a community.
Yeah, and of course, most people don't really like the creative process. They will pay lip service to liking it,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't really like the experience of making messes and mistakes and doing things that don't work out. It's one thing to spend an hour on a painting that doesn't work. It's another thing to spend 2 years on a novel that doesn't work. That's the process too. You have to accept that as the creative process, that there's no guarantee that what you're working on is going to turn out well. We just watched the Dolly Parton biography the other day and was struck by something I know, but I'm always struck by it. So I don't know how many hits she's had, 10, 15, I don't know what the number would be, but she's composed 2,000 songs. That means that 1,985 of her songs were ordinary. 15 or 10 or 15 were hits and the rest were ordinary. The same is true of anybody. Bob Dylan, Beethoven, anybody you would want to name. Only a percentage of the work is excellent. Most is ordinary and a lot is mediocre. It's very hard for would-be creatives or creatives to really buy into that idea that we show up and not attached to the outcome, that there are no guarantees, and this is the hardest part, that a high percentage of what we do won't work.
Yeah, it's a huge struggle for a lot of people, and especially if they're just starting on any creative journey.
Yep.
There's almost this misconception of, I'm going to be an artist, I'm going to be a writer, and there is this, like you were saying earlier, there's this whole skill set that you build over a period of time that I don't think that we as a society shed enough light on, that you build your skill. You don't just wake up knowing something masterfully.
Well, and even if you build your skill set, that guarantees nothing.
Mm. Yeah.
I want people to get stuck on the idea that if I acquire the right skills, I will always succeed. Nope. Most of Bob Dylan's great songs are when he's in his 20s, not when he's in his 40s, 50s, or 60s. He has a skill set early on. Actually, that's true of many American creative and performing artists. They do great work early on and fade out. They have the skill set, but it's not about skills. It's about disconnecting from the creative process at a certain point, maybe
Mm.
getting more interested in drugs, notoriety, celebrity, and other things than the creative process and going downhill rather than uphill. But be that as it may, even if you have a skill set, you still must buy the basic idea that you show up and not attached to outcomes. It's one of the reasons that my last book was The Power of Daily Practice, the idea that we need to show up every day to those things that are important to us. If we show up every ninth day or every 16th day, we won't show up to them at all. It just doesn't happen.
Mm.
So we don't want to live our life purposes intermittently. We want to try to live them every day. In a simple way, that sounds like starting out your, well, first you need to know what's important to you. That is actually first, which is not that easy for a lot of people. First, you need to know what's important to you. Then you start out each day asking yourself, which of those important things can I get to today? It's having a conversation around life purposes rather than one's perpetual to-do list. And once you start having that kind of conversation, then you start to build daily practices and you keep to them. You hold your own intention of doing something in a daily way. I've worked with enough creative performing artists to know that if they start to skip 3 days or 5 days, 2 years vanish. Suddenly life just overwhelms them, and now their mind is on the kitchen remodel or whatever it's on something else other than the novel they were working on, and huge amounts of time vanish. So it's why I try to arm wrestle every client into the idea of a daily practice, multiple daily practices, really, a creativity practice being one of them. But there are all kinds of other important daily practices, including parenthetically one that folks are really enjoying, and that's a warrior daily practice. An awful lot of people aren't feeling powerful enough or self confident enough or what have you. And by adopting a warrior daily practice, they set aside actual time each day to do something risky or do something that feels powerful or do something they're passionate about it, but that feels a little scary. So this is all a long-winded way of saying process is process. And if you want to deal with the realities of the creative process forthrightly, the best way to do it is to institute a daily practice and show up every day to the work.
Beautifully said. I could not agree more wholeheartedly. Um, I don't know if I might have shared the link too. I did a TED talk a couple years ago, The Art of Letting Go, and I share 3 steps that I hope people listen to, and that's create safe space, find something that ignites you or inspires you, and let go of the outcome. And something I was either listening to or reading, there was some similar crossover into recommendations that you offer that almost reminded me in some ways of The Artist's Way, Julie, like the morning pages. Can you shed some light? Because we do like to offer in these conversations some potential tools people can walk away with, simple and accessible ones.
Well, I'm not sure where to go precisely, but let me say a few things. With most of my clients, I have to wean them from morning pages.
Mm.
They have 50 volumes of morning pages, but they haven't written their book yet. So I advise them to have morning pages be afternoon pages so that they finally get to their real work. Um, and Julie and I have been traveling this path together from the very beginning. The Artist's Way and my first book, Staying Sane in the Arts, came out the same season from the same publisher, I think in 1991, or I'm not sure when. So we've been traveling this path for a long time. So I'm not saying anything against Julia, except morning pages, there are lots of traps, lots of things we do first thing that we ought not to do first thing, whether it's check our email too much or check in on the news too much, or morning pages, or almost anything because, now we get to the because, it's really important that our creativity practice, if we mean to be creative, that our creativity practice come first thing each day, not just each day, but first thing each day. And there are 3 big reasons for that. One is the obvious one that if you worked on something every day, you'd get a lot of work done. That's the obvious one. Number 2, this people don't know about very well, and that's by turning to your work first thing, you get to make use of your sleep thinking. You get to make use of what your brain's been working on during the night. We dream, of course, at night, but we also think at night. We do 2 different things. We dream in REM sleep and we think in non-REM sleep. We do a lot of great creative thinking. And all that thinking vanishes as soon as we turn to the new day, as soon as we start our morning pages or start our Tai Chi or anything, that sleep thinking goes away. So we've squandered that. But by turning to our creativity, or whatever it is, our painting, our composing, our writing, our software engineering, whatever it is, we get to make use of what our brain's been working on. That's a big deal. That adds 2 hours to our creative life for free because our brain's been working on that stuff already. So that's B. And then there's a C. And the C is the existential component. And that is by doing something that real, that important, that meaningful, first thing, we have the experience of having made some meaning on that day already. And the rest of the day can be half meaningless and we won't get depressed. It's important to do something real first thing rather than to try to live our life the other way around, which is to do our obligations first, with the hope of getting to something real at some point during the day. We almost never get there. We get too tired. These days are long. And we also get a little sad during that day because we get sad by virtue of not having gotten to our real work. So by the end of that day, by 6 p.m. or 7 p.m., virtually no one is going to turn to their creative work. They may have had the best of intentions, but they're not going to get there. So it's really important to get to our creative work first thing, not just every day, but first thing every day.
That may be the first time I've heard that, but your explanation behind it makes complete sense. I use morning pages on and off, and as I lead others through different workshops, recommending it as well. I've heard them say, "Is it okay if I do them at night because I'm finding this and that?" And their experiences are just what you're talking about. I'm like, they're just called morning pages. Do them whenever it makes sense to you. It's just, empty some junk out of your mind that you don't need rolling around in there.
Yeah, I mean, people use it as a meaning substitute.
Mm.
It's one thing to use it uh, expressively for self-awareness and self-healing and growth and all of those reasons. But to do it first thing is often an excuse in a way not to get to the writing that you mean to do. So yeah, that has to shift. Almost everything has to shift. And folks always ask me, well, can I have a cup of coffee or can I do something? Can I go to the bathroom before? And my answer is yes, but you want to get to the work in a dreamy way. You don't want to really fully wake up. The thing that you were talking about earlier, whether to call it flow or the trance of working or that thing that people manage to sometimes get into in the studio, you can have that in the morning by not waking up, by staying half dreamy. If you get too awake, then that whole mind thing starts happening. What am I painting? And what should it look like? And do I have enough blue on my palette and whatever? And we got too awake. But if you can stay in that dreamy, imaginative place, trance of working, flow, whatever to call it, then you'll not only get to the work, but you'll go to a much deeper place than if you had really awakened. So the headline is not only go directly to your work first thing, but try not to wake up,
Mm.
which sounds sort of anti-spiritual, like we're supposed to wake up in life. But
No, I hear your meaning. The main course that I teach as far as painting and wellness, that bridge itself is it's called meditative painting, and I've been offering it before it was a thing, early 2000s, and it's the art of painting nothing is what I call it, and I offer guided meditation, and then pull them out rather quickly, and the individual or the group creates or paints or writes whatever. There's many prompts they get in a trance-like state, and it is absolutely the most impactful. I've done this with thousands over the years, and by far, I mean, from small children to seniors in a senior center, and it's always a sense of clarity that they come out with. Like it doesn't, like, we don't set an intention specifically, this is what you're supposed to learn. It's very individual, and that just witnessing people creating in that kind of zone is I can't even describe what that's like to facilitate and witness.
yeah, and what you've done there in my language is you've created a ceremonial bridge from our everyday mind to the creative mind. And we need that bridge. Most people need that bridge because and people don't understand the following. All day long, we're supposed to get things right. That's completely appropriate. That's our job in life, to get things right. Pick up our kids on time, mow the lawn, whatever, drive on the correct side of the road. And then somehow there's a moment that's supposed to come where we have real permission to make mistakes and messes. We're supposed to get to this other mind somehow instantaneously without effort. Most people can't do that. They need the kind of thing you just described, a ceremonial bridge. Maybe it's a guided visualization or a meditation. The ceremonial bridge I suggest most often, I did a whole book on this called 10 Zen Seconds. The 10 of the title is one long breath, 5 seconds on the inhale, 5 seconds on the exhale. It's the idea of using a few deep breaths as containers for some right thinking. And you drop a thought into the breath, and it only takes you 10 seconds. Maybe you do it 3 times, so it takes you 30 seconds. And the right thought for what we're talking about now is, I'm completely on the inhale stopping. I'm completely stopping. So you'd breathe a few times and you'd incant is my phrase for this. You'd incant, I'm completely stopping. And what that I'm completely stopping stands for is not just I'm completely stopping my rushiness or my busyness, but I'm completely stopping my need to get things right. People have to train themselves to stop needing to get things right. They've been so overtrained by parental authoritarians and school authoritarians, school system authoritarians, to draw inside the lines and know what's up for the test, that they've lost their imagination. As you know, one of the hallmarks of creativity is the ability to connect remote associates. That is, things that don't ordinarily go together. So you connect a salmon over here with a skyscraper and you make a salmon-shaped skyscraper. Kids do that automatically. They'll make a salmon-shaped skyscraper. We balk. In fact, our mind can't even go there. A salmon-shaped skyscraper, oh my God, what's its use? Or oh, it looks ugly, or etc. So people have to reclaim their imagination, which is actually easier said than done. That's why I believe in all of these tactics like guided visualizations, meditations, ceremonial bridges, incantations, whatever, because most people need to break lifelong habits that haven't been serving them.
Yeah, beautifully said. And there was also something I heard, it reminded me. So I talk a lot about music is a big part of our programs, and the specific sounds, non-lyric, and certain type of vibration. And I share the playlist every time because once they get to that zone and they have that experience, it has the potential to train the body to react in the same way if they develop a practice. Oh, I hear this sound, I can take a deep breath, give myself permission to let go. And they don't even have to paint after a while. It can just be that intention of this is time to connect in this way, and it has the same impact on their day or whatever it is they're hoping to achieve in that moment. And we talk about that. And I also say one of the first things in the introduction to that specific workshop is this is the one class where you don't have to get it right. I'm not going to tell you how to do it, and you're not going to get some framework on, the step by step. And there's people that are almost borderline angry that I'm not outlining this criteria of I'm not going to have something in the end. Like, what's my husband going to say when I go home and I don't have a painting to show? Something along that. It's about product, and those are the people that are most impacted by the experience.
Yep. There were some interesting studies in the 1940s. That's a long time ago. During the WPA time, when um, Roosevelt was trying to get everybody employed to get us out of the Great Depression. So all kinds of research projects that never were done before or again were done. And one of the most interesting ones was about the difference between intelligent students and creative students as defined by their own teachers. That is, teachers were asked, who are your most creative students and who are your most intelligent students? Sometimes they were the same people, sometimes they weren't the same people. And so the studies tried to identify the differences between those two groups. The intelligent group needed to know what was on the test. The creative group didn't want to take the test. The intelligent group wanted to make money. The creative group didn't care about money. The intelligent group conformed in all the ways that standard tests could explain conformity. The creative group were like 2 standard deviations above the mean into nonconformity. They were different people. For whatever reasons, they were already different people as young people. I do have the belief that some people pop out of the womb stubborn. already stubborn. They look around at their parents and say, who are these people? And what are they saying? And what are these grown-ups doing? And this world's all wrong, and I'm going to correct it. And I'm going to put the world on my shoulders, and etc. And those are the ones who don't need what are the 3 steps to make this work. They don't, in fact, Gauguin has a line I like, which he says, like everyone, I know that 2 + 2 = 4, but that irritates me. It irritates us. We don't need to know the steps. We want to do it our own way, and we want to blow up the steps and move painting forward, or move writing forward, or move composing forward, or do something completely unique and unusual. We don't want to know what the steps are.
Wonderfully said. I love that. Uh, just so grateful for this conversation today. Is there something before we bring this to a close in a couple of minutes? Is there something that you would like to share? Maybe some work that you're working on right now. Your recent books, I think, are impeccably timed, especially with the daily practices, because I think that some people more than ever, there are more people right now with some idle time and looking for practices. And what would you like to highlight a little bit about what you're putting out into the world?
Well, yeah, um, certainly The Power of Daily Practice is a useful book for folks. It describes the elements of practice and varieties of practice and challenges to practice. So it's a good book. I also had a book come out this year, last year, we're into 2021, last year, called Lighting the Way, in which I invite people to learn about a philosophy of life I've developed called Kierism, which I think stands well against the Buddhisms and Taoisms and existentialisms of the world. So it's a complete philosophy of life. If that might interest folks, that's the book to look at, Lighting the Way. I have 2 or 3 or 4 books coming out this year, but the one that I think I'll mention is one called Redesign Your Mind. It's a very interesting book which takes as its central metaphor the idea of the room that is that our mind is a place we go, and that we can redecorate it and redesign it. This sort of going deeper than cognitive therapy, ideas like installing windows so it's not so claustrophobic, or getting that bed of nails out there and putting an easy chair in instead. It's playing on one particular metaphor of the mind as a room that we can, as I say, redesign and redecorate. So that book will be coming out soon. As folks can tell, I do a lot of different things, including being in the critical psychology, critical psychiatry, and anti-psychiatric camps. We don't believe in the current mental disorder model. I would have a lot to say about that. It's a separate conversation, but that's important work. And I hate that kids are getting all of these mental disorder labels when they ought not to be getting them.
Yeah.
But as I say, that's another conversation. But if folks are interested in what I just said, a couple of my books on that subject are The Future of Mental Health and Humane Helping. Those, and then there's another one for parents about helping them avoid having their kids acquire these mental disorder labels.
Great work. Thank
So
you.
if folks are interested in any of this, my site's the place to come to, ericmaisel.com, ericmaisel.com.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I like to ask my guests this last question before we end. I believe that along our life's journey, there's this sort of like a common thread, a message, something that comes through, be it through our work or our belief system. I wonder if you believe that, and it's fine if you don't. If you could kind of sum up what your message, like what you shine out into the light, or what you'd like our listeners to walk away with, a message, a phrase.
Yeah, I don't know to what extent it's true for other people, but I can say what it is for me. And I know it very clearly. And I know it from the age of 5 or 6 or 7. I've been a resistance fighter this whole time. That's the running thread. I think there's an awful lot of humbug out there, whether it has to do with belief systems or I'll just tell one quick anecdote. I grew up with my mom, had no dad, and was happy about that because I thought that the dads of my friends were all bullies. That's the way they looked like to me. They'd come home from work and start bullying the family. And I didn't need that. I didn't want that. And then very early on, I was reading The Existentialists and I read Sartre's biography, Les Mots, The Words. And he wrote that he hadn't had a father. And that really pleased him, that he was happy not to have a father lay full length on him, was his way of saying it. So I've had these beliefs from very early on that there are authoritarian personalities, and I'm still writing about the authoritarian personality in the family, bullies in the family. And I've been trying to put my finger in that dike all these many decades. So for me, the thread is, and this is a very sort of basic post-World War II frame of mind, I think. I think resistance fighting was inculcated in me early on in the aftermath of World War II. But that's been my ongoing mission, is to be a subversive unit of one in this world.
Beautiful and powerful. Thank you. Thanks for taking the time today. And I know that I'm excited that your work is out there. I see so much of just a lot of my own experiences threaded into what you're putting out into the world and leading others in very profound ways to do some similar, very powerful work. And I can't thank you enough for what you do.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Absolutely.